Well, welcome. Today I have with me Lauire Kopp Weingarten, and she's in Marlboro, New Jersey, and we're going to talk about becoming a CEP. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you.
So tell me, why was becoming a CEP important to you?
Well, I think college counseling is growing exponentially right now, and there aren't a lot of guidelines put in place. So sometimes parents go through the process with their children, and then as soon as they're done, they kind of think they might be an expert and they hang out a shingle and they're a college counselor. And I think it's very confusing for the public to know, who is a real counselor, or who is a knowledgeable counselor, I should say. So I think the fact that now there's an organization that has established criteria to designate those who are most knowledgeable in the field is really helpful. It provides consumers with some security and some confidence that the person that they're hiring has the knowledge and the expertise to guide students through the process. So I think it's important just because there seems to not be a lot of ways to distinguish one from another. And it does often lead consumers to make their head spin and not know how to choose somebody.
That's very true. That is definitely one of the things, especially in this profession as it's really growing, that we face. And part of the real strong value of becoming a CEP is to be able to distinguish your level of knowledge. So what were your concerns when you applied to take the CEP or to be a CEP?
So I had one concern, and that was the test. I didn't mind doing the application beforehand. I haven't taken a test since I finished graduate school. And I don't like taking tests. I'm not sure anybody likes taking tests, but I really thought that was decades behind me. That was really my only concern. It wasn't so much worrying about would I be able to do well on the test. I was confident that I knew what I was doing. But I had heard from other counselors what the questions were and that you had to memorize 30 schools. And I thought, can I do this? Do I want to do this in my free time? That was my one and only concern. Do I want to take a test? Do I want to prepare for a test? And then I guess a little bit in the background, what if I mess up the test? So that was it.
So how were those concerns handled by the office, the commission office?
I didn't really relay those concerns. I mean, I did speak to somebody once at one of the conferences, and they said, "Oh, if you know your stuff, you'd be fine." But it was really something I had to deal with internally. Will I gear myself up and study for this test and take it, or do I just let this go? And I felt that the benefits of getting that CEP designation really outweighed the fact that I'm going to be frustrated that I have to study for a test. So in the end, it really was something I worked out myself. Like, let's just go for it. I'm a big girl. I can take a test. So
good for you. So what tips would you have? So once you made that decision, how did you go about organizing your study, and what tips would you give for others that are looking and probably going through and have some of the very similar, hesitations? What tips would you have?
So the way that I did it, I mean, and everybody's going to have their own method, but my methodology was to really focus on the first part of the test, the institutional knowledge, because the professional knowledge, which was the case studies, I wasn't overly concerned about. I felt like I've done that so many times where somebody comes in and gives me their whole scenario and what's going on in their life and what their academic profile is and their extracurricular profile. So that part to me, I thought, okay, I could just read the case and kind of know where they're coming from, know the right questions to ask, pick the schools that they're applying to, or help them pick the schools, not dictate or anything. So that part I wasn't worried about. So I really focused on the first part of the institutional knowledge, where Steve had told me I need to give him 30 schools that I'm familiar with. You guys would pick 4, and then I would write on 2 of them, which automatically didn't sound so overwhelming to me, because I thought, okay, even if out of the 4 there was one I didn't really want to do, I only have to pick 2 of them. So what I did is I made an Excel spreadsheet of the 30 colleges. and I put all different information. So the colleges were down the side, and across the different columns, I put the location, the size of the school, the freshman class, the total undergrad class, the percent admitted, the average ACT and SAT, whether or not they give merit, whether or not they were test optional, what the ethnic breakdown was, just in case because some schools are very Caucasian, some schools are much more diverse. I wanted to be familiar with that. The graduation rate, the total cost of attendance, and whether they're public or private. So I just put those across for just a basic. And then I took my 30 schools and I put them in 3 different spreadsheets. So I hope this isn't getting too complicated, but I sorted them. So I had one list of the 30 schools alphabetically, one list of the 30 schools by size, which I color coded. So let's say pink was the small ones, were the small colleges, and then blue were the medium size, and purple were the large. And then I sorted it one more time by ACT score. Kind of left out the SAT because the whole new SAT is confusing still, the concordance. So I did it by ACT, which schools were less competitive, which schools were somewhat competitive, and which schools were ultra competitive. And then I started just reviewing just the data on that. After I did that and felt like I had a good handle of the small schools, the large schools, the highly selective, the less selective, I then went on to some guidebooks. So I took I find the Princeton Review 381 colleges very easy to use. So I started with that. They were not all in that, but most of my 30 schools were in that book. So I just refreshed my memory on what the culture was there, things like that. And I highlighted things that I thought I would forget, like which schools were test optional. Occasionally I'll forget one. So I just reviewed it. I spent one full day, like full day, going through the data, going through this, the academic data and the soft data. And then leading up to that one day, I did a few hours for several days up to it. So honestly, when I hear people say like, I can't study for this test, it's too overwhelming, I spent probably 2 hours on 3 days each, and then one full day, just kind of cramming it into my head so I could understand it and spit it back out. But I did feel that the test was very much emulated the decision-making process of a counselor, that I'm not just trying to memorize data, scores and average GPAs. I'm thinking of the whole person, and is this a good match for the person? And that's why I'm looking at geographic diversity, perhaps even religious diversity, size of school. So it actually was all stuff that is good to know anyway and good to refresh. So I didn't feel like I was, this was a waste of time or anything like that, because I knew that I would continue to use this in my business. So that's how I studied. It was one very, very long day and a few days with a few hours leading up to it. And that was more than enough. Like, I didn't have a problem with the test. It's nowhere near as overwhelming as it sounds. So that's how I study. That's, kind of kind of a very systematic approach.
There you go. Well, and I think you bring up a really good point that it's by organizing and looking at the colleges, and I think that's the area where most people are most apprehensive about this whole CEP exam aspect. But it is information you're going to use over and over. It helps you not just in the testing environment, but overall in working with your students. So I think that's a very valuable thing to point out. So I appreciate that. So what do you see as the benefits now that you've done this? You did this the end of last summer. What have been the benefits for you of becoming a CEP that you've seen?
Well, I have the certificate prominently displayed in my office. I have the initials after my name. I'm being extremely organized because one of the requirements is that you have to log all your schools, all your webinars. So now I have this great, because you guys have the website where everything's logged and displayed in order. So I have that. To be honest, I have not had parents come in and say to me, are you a CEP? I don't think a lot of them are aware of that yet, although I expect it to grow. But I have been able to incorporate that into my first meeting, where my free consultation, where I explain what it is. I explain that we are continually required to keep up on our college visits and on our webinars and on volunteer work and things like that. So, I mean, sometimes the benefits are a little bit more intangible. I don't know if I can quantify them. I feel great having it. I feel like I demonstrated to myself and to potential clients that I do have the knowledge to kind of display that, that CEP designation. But I don't really think I can't attribute tangible benefits to it right now. Although in New Jersey, there are only 8 or 9 of us who have the CEP. So I've been able to say that, this is not something that everybody gets. This is, so I think it helps.
Oh, definitely.
And I feel proud. Like I'm proud to have it.
Well, I think that's key too. And recognizing your professional achievement, and, it is quite a significant step and achievement in their profession. So it's definitely something that, more and more counselors should be aspiring to. So that's what we're looking for. Well, thank you, Laurie. This has been delightful. Thanks for sharing.